The good news according to St. Matthew, the 25th chapter. Glory to you, O Lord. For it is as if a man going on a journey summoned his slaves and entrusted his property to them. To one he gave 5 talents, to another 2, to another 1, to each according to his ability. Then he went away. The one who had received the 5 talents went off at once and traded with them and made 5 more talents. In the same way, the one who had the 2 talents made 2 more talents. But the one who had received the 1 talent went off and dug a hole in the ground and hid his master's money. After a long time, the master of those slaves came and settled accounts with them. Then the one who had received the 5 talents came forward, bringing 5 more talents, saying, Master, you handed over to me 5 talents. See, I have made 5 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. And the one with the 2 talents also came forward, saying, Master, you handed over to me 2 talents. See, I have made 2 more talents. His master said to him, Well done, good and trustworthy slave. You have been trustworthy in a few things. I will put you in charge of many things. Enter into the joy of your master. Then the one who had received the 1 talent also came forward, saying, Master, I knew you were a harsh man, reaping where you did not sow and gathering where you did not scatter seed. So I was afraid, and I went and hid your talent in the ground. Here, you have what is yours. But his master replied, You wicked and lazy slave, you knew, did you, that I reap where I did not sow and gather where I did not scatter? Then you ought to have invested my money with the bankers, and on my return, I would have received what was my own with interest. So take the talent from him and give it to the one with the 10 talents. For to all who have more, more will be given, and they will have an abundance. But from those who have nothing, even what they have will be taken away. And for this worthless slave, throw him into the outer darkness, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. The good news of the Lord. You gotta just love when the texts end like that. It's like, okay, good news, yeah, hooray. So, I do want to put a tag on that gospel text, and for a moment with your prayers, I want to talk about being blessed to invest. Being blessed to invest. An investment bank representative once interviewed a potential investment banker who had been let go from a previous job during a company's rounds of layoffs. What sort of qualities do you think an investment banker needs to do their job well, the interviewer asked. Being able to turn bad assets into something profitable, the investment banker said. How, the interviewer asked. Let me tell you a story, the banker replied. Mr. Money once bought a horse from a farmer for $100. On the date of delivery, the horse died. Bad news, the farmer began. I can't complete this transaction for you, Mr. Money. What has happened, Mr. Money asked. The horse died, the farmer replied. Then give me back my money, Mr. Money demanded. Sorry, I've spent it all, said the farmer. Okay. Bring the dead horse to me. Why do you want a dead horse? The farmer asked. I'm going to raffle it off, Mr. Money answered. The farmer laughed. You can't raffle a dead horse. Just bring me the horse. Mr. Money got the horse and organized the raffle. 500 people bought a $2 raffle ticket. Several days later, the farmer saw Mr. Money and asked, How did the raffle go? Very well, Mr. Money said with a smile. I made $998. Did anyone complain? Asked the farmer. Only the person who won the raffle. So I refunded his $2, Mr. Money said. And that, the investment banker said, answers your question. She was immediately hired. Today, I need you to come to the realization that no matter what your situation may be, we have all been blessed to invest. God has blessed God's children in order for us to turn around and invest into the expansion and building up of God's kingdom. If you don't believe me, just look at the gospel lesson. In that passage that I just read, Jesus is speaking to his disciples on the Mount of Olives. He tells them of the signs of the times regarding his return. In the verse just before our text, Jesus tells a parable about 10 bridesmaids or virgins, depending on which version of the Bible you're reading. We heard that text last week. And Jesus used the illustration to teach his disciples and his church today the need to be prepared for his return. He changes things up just a little here in verses 14 through 30. Still alluding to the end time, Jesus teaches us about being faithful with what we'll be in charge of between his ascension and his return. From this text, there are 4 things I want to lift up to you. When you realize that you've been blessed to invest, you realize that everyone has something. Our Bible tells us that a master called his servant together and gave them some talents. Now I know many times before you've heard this text used to talk about gifts and abilities. I think lots of pastors do that because they don't want to talk about money. I've got no problem talking about money in the church. The principles in this text could be applied to gifts and abilities, but I need to be clear that Jesus is talking about financial treasures, money. 1 talent in today's economy might equal about $300,000. This isn't a little bit of money. We see in our text that one servant received 5 talents, another 2, and the third received only 1, according to their abilities. That means they received between $300,000 and $1.5 million according to their ability. Paul tells us in Romans 12:6 that in his grace, God has given us different gifts for doing certain things well. Paul doesn't say that we have developed our own abilities to do things well. It's as God gives. Whatever our ability, God has definitely blessed us beyond measure. Jesus says that the master gave his servant different measures of talents. The one who had received 5 talents would be a millionaire, if not a multimillionaire today. The servant that received the 1 talent was still well off. And he should be. Everything that we look at and call our stuff is really God's. My Bible tells me God never denies any good thing to those who live right. Everything that God gives is costly, worth more than we could ever do or on our own. So even if you feel like the servant who received the least, remember it still has high value. Jesus' suffering and death on the cross paid the price for you to receive a blessing that all the money put together on the face of the earth couldn't purchase. And just before Jesus ascended into the heavens, he told his disciples they would receive power when the Holy Spirit came upon them, another priceless gift. He also told his disciples that when he went away, they would do the same works he did and even greater things. Everybody has been blessed with something, but not just to hold on to it or bury it the way the third servant did. You've been blessed to invest. Because everyone has been blessed with something, it brings us to my second point. Don't compare your money bag to anyone else's. In other words, be faithful with what you've been given. Be thankful for what you've been blessed with. Don't sit around moaning and groaning because you think you don't have enough. The Bible tells us that the master gave his servant a portion according to their ability to handle it. All right, let's be real here. Not everyone can handle large responsibilities. We've got to start out small and prove ourselves faithful with the small things in order to handle the larger responsibilities. So stop looking at everyone else's abundance and comparing it to what you've got and thinking you've got a measly blessing. First of all, that's an oxymoron, a measly blessing. Any blessing is wonderful. Secondly, stop feeling sorry for yourself and begin investing. There have been church people who've started off with small amounts of money and invested it and had an incredible return on their investment. Problem is, they talk about taking their money to invest in somebody else's stuff. What I'm talking about here is God's stuff. God gives you a fortune to invest back into divine stuff. When you do, there will always be a return on investment. There's no risk investing your blessing. There's no risk because, and this is point number 3 for those keeping track, we aren't expected to produce the same results. Notice in our text that the servants weren't expected to produce the same results. The servant who was given 1 talent wasn't expected to produce the same results as the one given 5 or 2. He was, however, expected to produce something. When the master returned, there was a day of accountability. The servants who were given 5 and 2 talents each doubled their blessing. The master speaks a blessing over them. Well done, good and trustworthy slave, and gives them more responsibility. Plus, he brings them into fellowship with him. But then we come to the third servant. And instead of bringing the master any sort of increase, the servant brings excuses. When you look at the excuses he was offering, it's clear that the servant doesn't know the true character of the master. The master didn't have a specific return on investment that he was expecting. He didn't have a specific amount, but he did expect something in return. He didn't expect the servant who received 1 talent to produce 5 more. He didn't even expect him to produce 1 more. But he did expect some result from the servant. Which brings me to the final point. You've got to use it or lose it. I started out by saying that God has given all of us something to invest. Even that investment banker story, that Mr. Money had something he could use to invest, even if it was a dead horse. Jesus tells us that those who utilize or invest what they were given would be given more in abundance. But those who don't invest or are unfaithful with what they're given, they'd lose it. Now, some of you are probably thinking, are we being a little hard on that third servant? I understand where you're coming from. It's clear the third servant understood his master well. He knew he was a harsh master who took crops from places he didn't plant or scatter seeds. That third servant decided to play it safe. He buried the money to make sure it wouldn't be lost. And he accomplished exactly what he set out to achieve. Nothing. As I love to say to my children, if you aim at nothing, you'll hit it every time. The first 2 servants don't say anything about their master, but their actions prove they knew it all the same. The master hadn't given them precise instructions about what to do with the money. They knew they had better plant and scatter it so that their master would have a harvest to reap when he returned. When it comes to using the things God has given us for building up God's kingdom, playing it safe is dangerous. It's there in the parable. The ones who used what they were given, the ones who risked losing it all were saved. The one who was afraid he might mess up was lost. All right, let me put it like this. Come Judgment Day, if I were to say, Lord, I wasn't 100% sure I was doing the right thing, but I took what you gave me and I used it for your glory, I'm sure I would get in less trouble than if I said, Lord, I wasn't 100% sure what I should be doing, so I took the blessings you gave me to invest and I buried them so I could maintain what was already there. Sisters and brothers, if you have buried something that the Lord has blessed you with, even if you think it's minuscule, use it or lose it. Dig it up and begin investing. I want to finish with the story that that's told about an incident with Abraham Lincoln. He had brought one of his aides along with him to a Wednesday night service at the New York Avenue Presbyterian Church. And as they walked back home, the aide asked the president how he liked the sermon. And Lincoln replied, I thought it was well thought through, powerfully delivered, and very eloquent. So you thought it was a great sermon? No, the president said. It failed. It failed because the preacher did not ask us to do something great. I would hate to repeat such a mistake. The one-talent servant knew that what he was supposed to do. His own words proved it. I knew you reaped where you didn't plant. I knew you gathered where you hadn't scattered seed. That servant knew he was responsible to do the planting and the scattering, but instead he did the opposite. Now you know too. You know that you have been blessed to invest. You know that God expects to reap a harvest from what's been divinely given to you. Now you have to decide what to do next. You can be a risk taker, asking God to show you how you can use what's been given to you for God's glory and not your own. Or you can be a squirrel and bury it in the dirt. You can either risk and reap or squirrel away and be sorry later. As an old saying goes, a ship is safe when anchored in the harbor, but that's not what ships are for. I can't force you to do anything, but I can encourage you to do something. Don't be a ship that never leaves the shore. Lift the anchor and push out into the deep. Don't be a sorry squirrel. Be a risking reaper, remembering that you truly have been blessed to invest. Amen.